Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. In today's video we're going to be talking about the rock apes of Vietnam. It's one of the most interesting and one of the strangest cases of cryptids, I think, just because of how many reports there was of these creatures during the Vietnam War by both sides, by both the American forces and the enemy forces, the NBA and the Viet Cong. So we're going to be getting into that, but before we start, I would like to say thank you for everybody who's donated to the Bigfoot Quest for the Wildman documentary series project. We've reached the goal, we've completed the GoFundMe, and a huge thank you to everybody. Huge shout outs to Cheyenne G, to Kevin S, Jared F, Alan and Nicola from Scotland. Huge thank you to Bradley Hatcher. He's been a massive supporter of this project, and I can't say thank you enough to all you people and everyone who's donated anonymously. A huge thank you to Carrie from Bigfoot Odyssey, and a massive thank you as well to Brandon Shoma. All of you people have made this project possible, and we're going to be getting it done this summer. So this is going to be very exciting to be able to get out into the bush for an extended period of time in an area where there are many reports. And I hope the adventure is as exciting for you guys to watch as it is for me to actually be out there. I'm going to do my best to give you the sense of what it's like to be out there for an extended amount of time through film and through a visual medium. So it's going to be a lot of work, but I'm really looking forward to making it for you guys. So thank you to everybody who supported this project and who has supported the channel. It really means a lot, and I'm glad we're finally complete here. Now, if you still are looking to support the project, I mean, you can still make donations to it. It's still live. If you still want to support the project further than what the goal was, you're more than welcome to make donations. And the more funding we get, the more cool things we can do, and the longer we can make the series. So the rock apes of Vietnam. This is one I've been kind of avoiding, I guess, for a while. I've always had this topic on my mind. I've always had these stories on my mind, but I never had gotten around to making a video. So what I'm going to do first is go over some stories that were written in an article on the Mysterious Universe website. They were written by Brett Swanser back in 2016. He did a really nice article up here, and I'll go over maybe about half of the article just to give you guys an idea of what some of these encounters were like. They're pretty intense, and I'm sure the people who experienced them in the jungles of Vietnam definitely felt like their lives were in danger, like they were probably about to die. So, I mean, a lot of these cases are kind of violent. They're the rock apes of Vietnam. They were known for throwing rocks. So, and that's something that, Bigfoot of North America have been known to do, is throwing rocks, whether it be to scare people out of an area, to intimidate them, maybe to hurt them, but more than likely not. But yeah, I'm going to go through some of these stories. I'm going to go through this article, and then once we do that near the end of the video, I'm going to share my thoughts on these mysterious rock apes. So let's get into it here. War brings with it not only stories of suffering, death, and struggle, but also those of mystery. Beyond all of the fighting and tales of battle or valor, there often seem to be other, more enigmatic phenomena lurking in the background. Indeed, some of the most mysterious, weirdest things seem to pop up in the remote battlefields of the Earth. From unexplained phenomena to ghostly happenings to strange beasts, war can be a wellspring of high strangeness. The Vietnam War was no different, and among the fighting amidst the humid, mosquito-choked jungles, American GIs began to come back with tales of something weirder than their enemy lurking in the forests of Vietnam. And it seemed that the Viet Cong were not the only thing to watch out for in the dense underbrush. Here, the foreign soldiers would come face to face with a creature that was well known by locals, yet new to them. A humanoid hairy biped, the likes of which none of them had ever seen, which would lurch forth from the deepest jungles to startle or even attack, and which would come to be known as the rock apes. Even before fighting started in the jungles of Vietnam, there had long been stories of something strange lurking in the remote areas here. Various peoples of the jungle-choked interiors of Vietnam, Laos, and northern Borneo particularly within the Vukang Nature Reserve, have a rich tradition of stories of a bipedal, hairy ape-like creature. These rock apes are said to be around 6 feet tall, stout and very muscular, with protruding stomachs and covered in hair ranging from brown to black in color, except for the knees, the soles of the feet, the hands, and the face, which remain bare. Although they inhabit isolated remote jungle areas, the rock apes are reported to be rather bold and aggressive, especially the variety from Borneo, which will apparently attack humans without thinking twice about it. They are said to travel in troops and are most active at dusk or during the night. The locals of these regions consider these creatures to be merely a fact of life. But the rock apes were not really known to the outside world until war began to impede into their domain. During the days when troops toiled and fought in clouds of mosquito-clouded jungle, dodging enemy bullets and hiking relentlessly through the humid, oppressive heat, there would be numerous reports from soldiers of strange creatures prowling through the forests that were neither human nor ape, and would come to be known as the rock apes. Accounts of encountering these creatures seem to have been commonplace throughout the Vietnam War, from both sides of the conflict. In many cases, the strange beasts were mistaken for enemy troops, only to startle soldiers when they were actually seen up close. One well-known account describes the ordeal of a 6-man unit from the 101st Airborne Division who were taking a break after a relentless hike through unforgiving mountainous jungle terrain carrying heavy packs. Even as they rested, they were attuned to the surrounding environment, very aware that the Viet Cong were everywhere and could strike at any moment. As the unit sat there resting, exhausted in their sweat-soaked fatigues, some trees located around 15 yards uphill then reportedly began shaking violently, and it was assumed that this was the enemy. The soldiers prepared their weapons and trained an eye on the suspicious jostling trees. As they sat in wait, mosquitoes buzzing around their heads and the creeping, sickening dread of the coming battle weighing heavily on their minds, it was then noticed that an oblong head with a face covered in reddish hair and possessing a huge mouth and dark, deep-set eyes had emerged from the brush. The startled soldiers then witnessed a strange creature step from the underbrush to reveal a 5-foot-tall muscular frame enveloped in the same matted reddish hair, after which it stood there on 2 legs to seemingly carefully scrutinize the man. The soldiers then speculated that it must be a large orangutan, before one of them pointed out that orangutans were not native to Vietnam. As they argued over what it could be, the strange beast purportedly lost interest in them and quietly slinked back off into the jungle. In one 1968 account from jungle veteran Robert Baird's diary, he described an incident in which his unit began hearing inexplicable noises along the outer perimeter of their camp late at night. Not knowing if what they were hearing was normal jungle life or the enemy, a Mexican-American corporal nicknamed Pancho took it upon himself to go out and investigate in the evening. Pancho determinedly marched up to the hill to the communications bunker to see what was going on. When the corporal was on his way back, he was witnessed to let off several short bursts of fire from his weapon before hurrying back to camp in a somewhat unsettled, agitated state. Almost immediately, the unit's lieutenant had been on the radio demanding to know who was firing and at what. When Pancho reached the camp, he excitedly related that he had been walking back and had noticed a bush that had not been there before. When he had leaned down to take a look, it then allegedly snorted at him, causing him to panic and fire. Baird would later say, "What he encountered was the ubiquitous rock ape of Vietnam. I would come to learn that they were nearly everywhere and quite fearless. That is what we had heard near the wire that night." In another encounter from 1969, a patrol was caught off guard by enemy fire, after which everyone took cover. It was then that something strange made its presence known to one of the group. As the witness was laying there avoiding getting shot, there was a figure that broke out of the thick vegetation, which at first seemed to be a large man, but as it ran past, it was clear this was something else altogether. As the witness was laying there avoiding getting shot, there was a figure that broke out of the thick vegetation, which at first seemed to be a large man, but as it ran past, it was clear this was something else altogether. The figure was described as being around 7 feet in height, impressively built and mostly covered with reddish hair. Whatever it was moved extremely quickly, but was then caught by some bullets in the crossfire, after which it stumbled but didn't go down. It was then that the enemy began yelling something to each other excitedly that the witness could not understand before running off, with one of the enemy even leaving his weapon behind in a panicked haste. The American patrol regrouped and headed to a more secure area, And that night they were assailed by a barrage of strange animalistic noises from the night, sounding like whines, barks, howls, and grunts. The next day, some of the patrol requested permission to go investigate what had been seen and heard the previous day. And as a search was underway, they came across an enemy soldier that seemed to have been viciously torn apart. The patrol was so disturbed by the gruesome sight that they ran back to their base by the hill, and one of the witnesses would later say, "The rest of the time we were in Vietnam, I never heard the sounds or saw anything like it again." The talk of what we had seen spread very quickly, and some of the locals called it a name that I can neither pronounce or remember, but the translation, if I recall, was stench monkey or foul monkey, something like that. I can't remember for sure. What I do know is that it bothered me so much that I transferred from there to a job on a helicopter so that I wouldn't have to be in the jungle anymore. In another shocking account, a platoon was overrun by large numbers of the creatures. In 1966, a highly strategic location known as Hill 868 had allegedly been the site of a battle between the Marines and a large group of rock apes. In the account, Marines operating in the area called their captain to report movement in the brush, which they believed to be a large force of Viet Cong headed their way. The captain then radioed back saying that they should stay in place and that no one was to fire in order to not give away their position. The patrol soon radioed back to say that it turned out that it was not Viet Cong after all, but rather a large group of hairy bipedal humanoids all around them. The Marine Patrol was commanded again not to open fire, but instead to throw rocks at the creatures to scare them away. This would prove to be unwise, as the rock apes then began hurling the rocks back with great force, all the while screeching and growling all around them in the jungle, an estimated hundreds of them. Despite the assault of rocks and the numerous requests for permission to open fire, the Marines were nevertheless told not to shoot, but rather to use bayonets instead. Shortly after, the captain can hear screeching and screams of pain from both Marine and ape alike over the radio, as well as the frantic message, "We're going hand to hand." Shortly after that, the hill erupted in a roar of gunfire, screams, and screeching. When the captain sent men to go investigate, the war-torn area was found to be littered with injured men, as well as allegedly the bloodied bodies of several of the mysterious rock apes. No Marines had died, but several were seriously injured and had to be evacuated by helicopter. The alleged battle became so infamous that it was called the Battle of Dong Den. Hill 868 became known among the men as being allegedly so infested with the rock apes that it was called Monkey Mountain. In 1968, members of Mike Company of the 3rd Battalion of the 5th Marines operating on Hill 868 apparently often came across plentiful physical evidence of the creatures, such as droppings, tufts of hair, or footprints, as well as hearing their eerie barks and cries at night, and the rock apes even occasionally assaulted them with rocks lobbed from the jungle. The apes were described as throwing like girls, but with velocity, and men were reported as being often seriously injured by the hurled stone projectiles. In one account given by a veteran named Steve Canyon, a unit of Marines was out in the jungle of Hill 868 at night testing out a new muzzle flash and a noise suppressor for their weapons. As they were setting up, they suddenly noticed a rock ape glaring at them from the thick vegetation, reportedly completely unafraid. After a few moments of staring at the soldiers, the creature was said to then let out a sound like the bark of a dog. One of the men threw a rock at it to scare it away, and hit it dead on, after which the ape picked up a rock of its own and hurled it at them. It was then noticed that there were more of the rock apes gathering around in the jungle, around 20 of them, which all began screeching, howling, and throwing rocks at the frightened men in unison. Despite the threatening situation, the unit did not open fire, instead making a hasty retreat. When later asked why they did not shoot the creatures, Canyon would say, "I don't know, it didn't seem right. But those apes started to come at us, and we ran as fast as we could, and we didn't stop until we were out of the jungle." So those were some very interesting stories, definitely very intense, and if any of us were in any of these situations, we would probably feel like our lives were on the line, Being in a very unfamiliar area, a very dangerous area, you're in a war zone to begin with. You don't know where the enemy is, and the enemy can strike at any time. And so you have that on your mind, but also, after hearing tales of these rock apes, I wonder how it must have been. It must have been absolute hell. you know, being in those jungles and not knowing what you're going to run into. But, you know, some of these cases where they say there was over 100 of them, like, can you imagine that? Imagine being in the forests of North America and encountering like 100 Bigfoot creatures at once. I mean, I think the closest story we have to something like that is the Mushallot Harry case. And that wasn't even close to 100. I think that was maybe 20, 25 creatures, which is a lot. But cases of these rock apes go back to like the early 1800s. There's stories of these unknown primates, and it's very interesting in those cases. A lot of those early cases, it's reported that they had tails. So I guess that would make them more monkey-like and less ape-like. But I've been looking into like them potentially being an orangutan or something along those lines, and you do hear in one of the stories, one of the soldiers is like, orangutans aren't native to Vietnam, there's no orangutans here. Which, you know, is true, but there was indeed orangutans that did exist, you know, way back in the day, thousands of years ago. There are remnants of a species of orangutan that were found in a cave, very similar to how like the Gigantopithecus fossils were found in a cave. This species is called Pongo hujeri. I think that's how you pronounce it, Pongo hujeri. But the fossils were found in Tham Hai Cave. And it's an extinct species of orangutan from the Pleistocene epoch, which ended a little less than 12,000 years ago. But another interesting thing is that when you look at an orangutan and you look at the feet, they aren't Bigfoot-like at all. And there was expeditions actually conducted by the Vietnamese government after the war, you know, to go out and find these creatures and find evidence of them, and they did recover footprints and track casts, and they look very similar to Bigfoot track casts. So, I mean, when you compare these tracks to the feet of an orangutan, they don't really match up, and I would say it's something close to what we imagine the orang pendek to be like, the orang pendek from Sumatra, and another Bigfoot-like cryptid that's from Southeast Asia. So, and in these places like Vietnam and Borneo and Sumatra, you know, they're full of monkeys and apes that we do know to exist. So it's more likely that there's something like this out there, an undiscovered primate. It's more likely that they existed there than they do here. So, you know, you don't go around the woods of North America and you don't run into species of ape that are known to exist. They just aren't naturally here. But they are naturally in these jungle areas in Asia. Lots of monkeys, lots of apes, you know, gibbons, snub-nosed monkeys, things of that nature. And orangutans, you know, in Sumatra and in Borneo. So there's always new species being discovered every year in Vietnam as well. Not necessarily primates, but species of all different kinds. Which is very interesting, and lots of places for something to hide, lots of dense jungle. But I think these stories are really cool. I think it's interesting that, you know, both sides, both the United States military and the NVA and the Viet Cong, both of them were looking out for these creatures and were encountering them and were scared of them. You know, it's not just a legend that American soldiers made up. It's something that was experienced, you know, by everyone involved in that conflict. And like I said, reports going back to the 1800s, maybe even before that, but written reports going back to the early 1800s. And it does say something when, you know, the government will go out and conduct expeditions. It's kind of similar to how the Chinese government was out looking for Bigfoot-like creatures, and, you know, Jeff Meldrum was actually involved in that, and tracks were found, and tracks were cast, and tracks were found that were very similar to Patty's tracks in the Patterson footage, you know, with the mid-tarsal break. They were very similar. There was actually an episode of Destination Truth with Josh Gates where they investigate the Bigfoot-like creature of Vietnam. They call it in the show Batutu. And I think it's episode 1 of season 5. It's on iTunes. I did find it on iTunes and I watched it, and it's really cool. And they actually show one of the track casts that was found. A very violent type of creature, very unpredictable, it seems, very curious as well. But the idea of them hurling rocks at people, it's kind of scary. But I wouldn't want to be moving through the jungle at night on a patrol or on an ambush and then running into a group of these rock apes, running into 100 of them, even 20 of them. It would be absolutely terrifying. I don't know if there's been any recent reports, in recent years, like in the last 10 years or so. I have no idea. But I'm sure there's people out there looking. And I think the stories of these creatures are very credible. There's so many different places in the world that have reports of upright, walking, bipedal, ape-like beings that are undiscovered. It's kind of crazy. But anyways, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video was brought to you by Audible.com. Audible is one of the biggest providers of audiobooks and podcasts, and they have thousands of titles in their library. Now, I have a link down below in the description. If you want to go sign up for the 30-day free trial, you can actually get a free audiobook of any kind. And they have a lot of Bigfoot content on there. I think there was like 8 or 9 pages of Bigfoot audiobooks. So when you sign up for the free trial, you'll get a credit, and you can actually use that to get any audiobook on there. And they have like Jeff Meldrum's book, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. So like if you're into Sasquatch, I think that's the #1 book you should get if you're looking for an all-around good audiobook to get lots of information on the subject. I would get that book. So you can choose from a whole bunch of different topics as well. Like they have lots of UFO and alien stuff if you're into that. But the Bigfoot stuff is really good. They also have ones that are like going over lots of really creepy encounters. So, if you want to download that one and listen to that before you go to bed, that's something I do when I go into the bush. I'll download like audiobooks and podcasts that are really creepy, and I'll try and fall asleep to them. So not only do you get a credit every month to pick any audiobook, but you also get 2 Audible original titles from a monthly selection that they have on there. So yeah, sign up for the free 30-day trial. If you don't like it, you can cancel it before it runs out, and you have your free audiobook. Go to the link in the description, audibletrial.com/mountainbeast. That's audibletrial.com/mountainbeast. Get your free audiobook, and at the same time, you're also supporting Mountain Beast Mysteries. So it's a win-win for both of us. I get a little bit of kickback, you guys get a free audiobook, we're all happy. Thank you guys for watching this video. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.